Now, the Competition Commission of India has fined Meta 213 crores for abusing its dominant position through WhatsApp's 2021 privacy policy. Now, effectively, what happened in 2021 was that WhatsApp updated its privacy policy. And if you remember, generally, sometimes you're asked an option whether to select or accept or reject these changes. In 2021, in its update, WhatsApp didn't ask you that. It just asked you to effectively take it or leave it. The CCI has now ordered WhatsApp to stop sharing user data with Meta companies for advertising for 5 years and to disclose what data is shared, how it is used, and for what purpose. Meta now disagrees with the ruling. Meta, remember, is the overarching body which owns Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. And Meta has stated that the 2021 update did not affect the privacy of personal messages, and it has decided to appeal against the CCI ruling over the matter. Now, according to the tech giant, the update was rather aimed at introducing optional business features and improving transparency. It's worth noting that with over 500 million users, India remains the largest global market that WhatsApp has. On this very important debate, let me go across to my guests who are joining me. I have with me Shree Parthasarthy, partner and leader of the Digital Trust and Transformation. And we also have Pawan Duggal, noted cybersecurity expert, who's joining us at this point. Thank you both, gentlemen, for joining me. Good afternoon to both of you. Shree Parthasarthy, let me begin with this. It seems this is a trend now of the CCI, at least cracking down on the monopolies which big tech employs in India. In September itself, we heard updates coming in from the Supreme Court ruling that has been going on between CCI and Google. Now we understand the CCI has decided to take on WhatsApp also because effectively the Competition Commission believes that WhatsApp has been using its monopoly in the messaging space at this point to unfairly roll out privacy updates without taking the consent of its users. Do you think this is a step in the right direction?
I think if we unwrap some of these things and look at Meta and what it primarily did in India and what it possibly did in other locations, I think I see an imbalance in terms of their approach. For example, in India, they basically rolled out these particular changes and these particular updates, whereas in European Union and others, where there are stricter and stringent policies related to privacy and data sharing, they did not basically share that. So that was one. Second element is, I think they did not give a clear option for the users at that particular point to say whether you can choose it or leave it. And it was not that any of us had that particular option. And considering that these were platforms which were significantly being used by the population already, so the population had to go and actually do that. At that point in time, I think since there were no other options, I think, and if I look at what Competition Commission is saying right now, it creates a monolithic infrastructure in them and where they start controlling a lot of things in terms of communication, which is basically happening significantly, whether it's in terms of private communication or business communication. And I think it's rightfully so for Competition Commission to basically look at it from that angle. But I think the other angle also that needs to be looked at from from an India perspective is we have been sitting on the privacy law for such a long time. While it is law, but the rules and other things that need to be governing the entire aspect of data sharing and other things is still not in place. And organizations, while they are preparing towards privacy in terms of getting ready for DPDPA and other things, organizations are still not clear how the rule set will apply to them and what would be the kind of penalties. If some of these things were in place when Meta was actually rolling this out, then we could have used DPDPA to actually enforce some of these particular things rather than having the Competition Commission basically looking at it. And Meta did not basically roll this out in other geographies, primarily because they had very stringent policies, and which is where it is. And I think at this point in time, yes, retroactively, we need to look at what has happened in this particular space so that there's some level of corrective action that can be taken. And I think Meta should definitely be pulled up to make sure that they are, if they as they are sharing a lot of this particular information, and as per DPDPA, there has to be consent. And if they have not taken explicit consent from the user, they need to also basically do that.
All right, let me bring in Pawan Dugal. Of course, he's one of India's foremost gurus when it comes to cybersecurity. Pawan Dugalji, a lot of our viewers will have a very basic question, which to probably you might come across as immature, but the fact still remains a lot of people believe that honestly क्या ऐसा डेटा है मेरे पास जो व्हाट्सएप ने लीक भी कर दिया तो ऐसा की क्या बड़ी बात होगी ये Can you explain to our viewers why even data on WhatsApp messages in the form of good morning forwards or yeah, photographs or it is still valuable data and is a very important source for data mining?
Well, we all have to understand that we are no longer just human beings. We are data entities because we are generating data on a 24 by 7 basis. And it's this very data that companies like Meta want to monetize. So when one thinks, what am I generating or mujhse kya hoga? That's not the correct approach. Today, every person and his or her data is valuable because that's what's getting monetized. So when Meta is offering you these kind of platforms, world-class platforms, which are free, which should logically be made chargeable, it's very clear that you are the product. And users need to understand that. Unfortunately, in India, we have this new revolution going on, which I call it the Great Indian Vomiting Revolution, where Indians are vomiting data about their personal, professional, social lives on the internet without thinking about the ramifications. And what better platforms to do so than WhatsApp? And most of the people realize that
Yeah.
WhatsApp has become a kind of a national religion because it's uniting so many Indians. But none of them land up reading the terms and conditions where WhatsApp clearly says, I will be monetizing your data in gross violation of what your expectation is going to be. So I think the time has come where people have to be consciously clear that what they see in advertisements about platforms, it may not necessarily be borne by the terms and conditions of those platforms. People say WhatsApp is end-to-end encrypted, 100% safe, so no problem. I think you land up reading the terms and conditions, you'll realize the fine print and the practical problems therein. And more so when Meta, WhatsApp is sharing this with all other Meta companies, you have to realize that you've already become a guinea pig in the laboratory of these big tech giants who want to keep on experimenting on you as a guinea pig,
Yeah.
keep on taking your data, keep on monetizing it, and keep on violating your digital rights and digital privacy. So I think users have to be more careful that before you start signing up or using any platform, please read the terms and conditions so that you can understand how these platforms are going to go ahead and use your particular data. Don't expect the law to jump in because the law will come in later. But yes, India has in place the Indian IT Act. India has in
Exactly.
place its data protection law, being the Digital Personal Data Protection Act. But the problem is the DPDP Act has still not been implemented because no rules under the same DPDP Act have yet not been finalized by the government. So don't wait for the law to come and protect you. Protect your own self. Be judiciously careful on how you will land up choosing what platforms for the purposes of sharing your data. And ultimately, let's adopt more cyber hygiene to only share data on a need to know basis. There's no need for you to keep on vomiting your data with the rest of the world and leaving behind digital footprints which will come back and haunt you. Therefore, more caution, care, due diligence will have to be your guiding mantras as you go ahead and interact on platforms like WhatsApp.
Well, Mr. Dugal, I certainly hope that a lot of viewers, particularly senior citizens like my parents, are listening to you right now and taking in notes about what the advice you're giving. But the other question I have is also about Meta as such. This is a group, Mr. Dugal, which has been involved with the problems of data sharing in the past. We all remember the very international scandal of Cambridge Analytica, which brought in Facebook at this point. Questions clearly persist over Meta's dominance, especially when it comes to allowing the free information of and sharing of data within its platforms, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, or WhatsApp.
Clearly, India has failed to effectively implement its intermediary liability provisions under Section 79 of the IT Act. Now, these platforms have been given a limited exemption from legal liability, provided they are able to show that they have complied with the provisions of the IT Act, rules and regulations. They have exercised due diligence while discharging their day-to-day obligations, and they do not conspire or abet in the commission of any offense. Now, unfortunately, the law is being interpreted by most of these big tech companies to say the law gives me a carte blanche, kind of a blanket license to do what I want to do because I have my statutory exemption from legal liability. I think the time has come where the government now needs to effectively enforce its powers under Section 87 of the Information Technology Act of 2000 and come up with specific rules and regulations asking these intermediaries to ensure compliance with these provisions of law, else their statutory exemption from legal liability is taken off. And I think there's a huge another gap area that India has not yet begun prosecuting any of these big tech giants like
Yeah.
the company in question. Once you start prosecuting them for their failure to comply with the intermediary requirements under the IT Act and the IT rules, you'll quickly start realizing that almost all companies will begin to start complying. People know in India you have a cyber law, but people also know in India that the cyber law is not being effectively enforced. And that's why people want to piggy ride on their Jugaad school of management, on their lucks to go ahead and deviate from the provisions of this law. The idea is to effectively enforce provisions of existing law. The idea is to make these intermediaries more accountable. The idea is to come up with stringent provisions under the rules, under the DPDP Act, so that they cannot go ahead and use, publish, process, or transmit any personal data as well as non-personal data without the specific consent of the concerned users. So a lot of that will be dependent on political will and how as a nation we want to go forward. But if we are going to come up with lax implementation of existing laws, we should be prepared that these kinds of scenarios will keep on happening. And that's the reason why it's taken a Competition Commission of India to take them head on under the competition law rather than under the intermediary liability. I think the message has to be given loud and clear to the world at large. India is the most populous nation in the world. We are more than happy to come and do your business here. But don't take Indians as guinea pigs. Don't take their data without their consent. Otherwise, be prepared to face stringent legal liabilities. And now with the fines of up to 250 crore rupees per contravention coming under the new DPDP Act, the central government will now have a more cogent tool to go ahead and enforce data protection and respect for data privacy amongst these big tech companies.
Well said indeed, Mr. Duggal. Mr. Shree Parthasarthy, I'll come to you for the final word. A lot of this market dominance and abuse comes from the fact that WhatsApp enjoys a near monopoly in the market, especially when it comes to instant messaging platforms here. Is a step to counter these problems over data security in terms of countering also its monopoly? Like a simple example one can see is WhatsApp was never meant to be an office messaging platform, yet almost all office groups, especially across all industries, use WhatsApp for official communication, for official groups here. When there are internationally, there are other platforms like Slack, for instance, which are available. Similarly, for private messaging, there are better alternatives like Signal, which are available. Is it time for Indian users to start looking beyond WhatsApp and for Indian companies to start looking beyond WhatsApp and go for other platforms which are a bit more bespoke and a bit more tailored for the specific purposes?
I think options that are there are definitely there, and these options in terms of Telegram and other messengers have always been there, right? I think there are a couple of Indian versions like Hike and other thing also which have been available for a long time. But I think the reason that people have gotten attracted or there's been a significant amount of onboarding from a WhatsApp is, I think, primarily based on its convenience. So I think from a convenience perspective, I think there is definitely this one. A better approach here, rather than telling people, hey, you should possibly look at other platforms and other things, which is where you will possibly have a better level of traction in terms of security and privacy and other things. I think the better way to do it is, as Mr. Duggal said, how do we enforce? How do we take the IT Act? How do we take the Privacy Act and protect the citizen to say, hey, if this is particularly infrastructure that is being provided here, and we are the largest base of users across the world, then the question is that the right level of checks and balances and controls also need to be enforced so that people can ride the platform, but ride safely on it. And should also have the assurance that any data that they're sharing, whether it is on the office or on the private aspect, is being protected and being managed effectively. And if there is any data sharing between Insta, Facebook, and WhatsApp and other things, and the biggest challenge is this, right? The moment they know WhatsApp and other things, the advertisement, they make money on the advertisement. That is one of the reasons these particular platforms. The question is also, are they allowing other platforms to advertise freely on their particular overall infrastructure? That is one. And are they providing and sharing this particular data to other people also? So the key thing is, one is to make the platform safer rather than telling the users to go to some other place. And also, one thing that I disagree with Mr. Dugal is that while users are vomiting data and possibly doing a lot of things from that aspect, I think they do not have too
Mhm.
much of a choice in terms of a platform. So I think enforcing some of these things at a government and a legal perspective are more important than us primarily asking the users to move away. And I think which is what we need to do. Users will be prolific because that is the convenience that they are primarily looking at. So we need to start pushing. So I think the biggest thing is control mechanism, checks and balances, and fines and all things
Okay.
that we impose on these particular larger infrastructure.
All right, Shree Parthasarthy and Pawan Dugal, thank you so much for joining me on this very interesting debate that we have had on the Mirror at 1.